Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is a huge cultural stepping stone in media. There have been a whole bunch of creators noticing and showing love for how the movie provides actual representation for Black and Hispanic people with a depth and detail that we've never really seen before in film, especially in one straight out of Hollywood. But what I haven't been seeing is my army of curry-munching brethren saluting the best representation we've ever had in a superhero role. Where are all the biryani brigaders, samosa slingers, glob gangsters, and roti rockstars that should be parading this character that put us on the map as something other than a convenience store worker, taxi driver, or Ravi from Jessie? Fucking weird ass. The series had already had a huge impact on me before any of this was even introduced. In Spider-Verse 1, I found Miles to be one of the most relatable characters I'd seen in years despite not sharing any of his background. The only experience I have in common with Hispanic people is that people sometimes say I look Mexican. And even with that, I really felt like a piece of me was on screen. His identity being so thoroughly detailed and extensive made him feel real even if he wasn't exactly like me. And one of the most powerful things you can do in media is give the illusion that your characters aren't characters, but real people. The thing about Miles as a character though is that he isn't one note. It's not like he's just this half black, half Puerto Rican kid and there's nothing past that. He's a young guy growing up in the city, living in New York out of this tiny ass apartment in Brooklyn with overbearing parents that criticize everything he does. He's transferring schools and going through the struggle of trying to fit in this new place while still having his own separate identity crisis because he's starting to grow up. He very clearly has his own defined personality and that makes him anything but a blank slate. This runs the risk of alienating a lot of people. You've got this hyper-specific character established from the start, and that means that some people won't be able to put themselves into the shoes and self-insert as well as a character with no strong background like Shinji or Greg Heffley. But certain people will see some part of themselves come alive on screen, or all of the parts of them. And they included both narrow and broad things to relate to, so it's not like they're only appealing to this niche community. Pav is nowhere near as detailed of a character, but the elements they did choose to focus in on and develop touch on elements that pretty much any lil dude of Indian descent is familiar with. You know the scene where Miles is standing in the crowd and MJ is giving the speech about how anybody can put on the mask and it's their turn and he feels like she's talking directly to him?
Powers of one kind or another. But in our own way, we are all Spider-Man. And we're all counting on you.
That's exactly how this felt, except the speech was about how I'm a nerd and awkward around girls. If you thought this character was offensive and insensitive, then you're probably not Indian, because all of this shit is true. And the self-awareness of the stereotype means that even if you don't think it applies to you, and it is a generalization, then you can still appreciate the joke because you for sure know somebody that is exactly like this. Who did we have before this? Sanjay from Fairly Odd Parents? Ravi? Again? Baljeet kind of put us into the conversation, but he was a chronic wedgie victim and he did this. So it wasn't the best representation. Some people might say it creates the question of where do you draw the line between stereotyping and representing? And there is no line, bitch.
Fuck you, bloody!
India Man was one of the most over-the-top comical representations of growing up as an Indian kid. The only thing they missed was the fob stash era. And none of that is something to be ashamed of. I love Spider-Man since I was a kid, and before I already related to him because I knew he was just this kid from Queens that grew up nerdy, and now all of a sudden he has Shiva hair and is dripped out in gold. It also helps that his superhero persona isn't really based around his origin. What I mean by this is other cultural characters like Moon Knight have Egyptian origins and powers that reflect that. Kamala Khan has her bangles that are the source of her powers, but Indian Spider-Man is just Spider-Man, but he's also Indian. It's not like they made him the great monkey hero or the samosa slinger. I think the thing about diversity is that we want our heroes to be typical in nature and in their origin, but we want them to be played by somebody that's actually like us, not just somebody that looks like us. It shows that anybody can fill those shoes, not just a bog standard American teen with no spice. You can hold on to those cultural ties and things that make you special in your everyday life, but when you put on the mask, you're just an ordinary hero. Funny how that works. If they changed his character and made it so that he like sprayed curry instead of webs, I would hate that. But at the same time, it is kind of cool to see characters that are like me in places where traditionally like me people would also be. Aladdin was cool, even though he's just a chubby-handed reassembly of anything and everything brown, similar to Spam except for people with dots on their head. And for the time, it was cool to see something that at least kinda resembled me. But the thing is, if I wanted to see somebody that looks like me on screen doing things that we typically do, I would just watch a Bollywood movie. The thing that makes this so special is that there's a character that's just like me doing ordinary things in an ordinary environment. I think the reason we haven't gotten more things like this before isn't because they're malicious or pandering without really caring. I think the problem is that they're bad writers. Because in order to make characters like this convincing and not seem disingenuous and like you're just trying to win points with the community, you need somebody that can actually write it in well. And of course it helps to have people that are actually that thing on the writing team, but even then, it's not really too necessary. If you've done your research or just have knowledge from being around these communities, then you can work it into the plot and exposition in a natural way that doesn't come off as pushy or weird. I think maybe before, these movies had diversity teams built specifically around trying to get all the right details. But they aren't writers, so even with a first-hand perspective, it comes off as unnatural and forced, like they're trying to shove it down your throat. And that's exactly where Spider-Verse differs. The incorporation of diverse characters feels genuine because it's seamlessly woven into the fabric of the story. The brilliance of the film isn't just in its groundbreaking animation or in its clever script, but its commitment to telling a story that's universal yet unique to each character's experience. It gave us representation done right. It didn't just stick a diversity sticker on the box and call it a day. It showed us characters from various backgrounds thriving in their own individuality and united by a shared journey. It wasn't about checking boxes, it was about good storytelling that resonates and builds bridges for real. We've seen what's possible, and now we want this to be the new standard, not the exception. Rise up, Jira Jedis, celebrate this, and show them that we're here to stay. Jesus Christ. It was a good idea, but forget it. Please subscribe so that I can eat. And so that you don't miss my new videos. New videos coming real soon. Press that button so you don't miss anything. Bye bye.